Good morning. My name's Ed Cameron. I'm going to be the MC for this morning. City Council President and longtime attendee and Democrat Barry Connell is going to give us a very brief welcome, and with emphasis on the word brief, because Barry doesn't know the understanding of the word brief.
I don't get no respect. Hey, welcome, Democrats. It's great to see you all here this morning. Welcome to Newburyport if you don't live here. It's always sunny in Newburyport, in case you hadn't heard. And I wouldn't lie, right, Ed? This is
Always sunny.
Always sunny. I do want to point out to you that one of the reasons we've always had this event and enjoyed it so much was because it gives us an opportunity to sit with our friends and our neighbors, and I extend that friendship and neighborliness to all of our friends and neighbors from Boston and those from Washington who may wander in the door at some point or another today. But before you leave Newburyport, let's note that the great success that we've had here over the past several decades is in part due to what you do in all of our neighboring communities as well as what we do here. And I don't want to pass up the opportunity to thank all of our legislative delegation in Boston for helping us out through the years, our congressional delegation and our senators in D.C. who have also played critical roles in our rebirth and in the success of all of our communities. So thank you. Welcome to Newburyport. It's great to see you all.
Thank you, Barry. So our first speaker needs no introduction, but I'll give you one anyway. I think he has been here for every one of these, and I don't know, I don't have the placard in front of me. We've had 14 of these. So I'd like to introduce Secretary of State Bill Galvin.
Thank you. You can roam around as much. Well, thank you very much, Ed. I think I have been here for everyone, and I look forward to it. This is a great gathering. It really is very representative of this area. It's a very great asset to our party, so I'm always happy to be here. I wish Kathy were here this morning. I know she can't be, but we miss her. First of all, let me express my thanks to all of you. I'm delighted to be continuing to serve you as the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and very proud of that effort that we put in last year, and very grateful for the support we received, especially in the general election. I lost 2 communities. We're going to deal with those 2 soon, but the other I won. But I want to really, in all seriousness, speak to what's before us, because right now this is a very critical time, obviously for our country and for our party and for our state. One of the things that I'm most involved with right now is the 2020 census. I'm the designated liaison for Massachusetts for the census in 2020, as I was for the 2 previous efforts. Now, it's always a challenge to get a head count of any kind, but especially when you're dealing with the circumstances we find ourselves in going into this census. Here in Massachusetts, there's always an issue regarding the counting of students, most of whom are here, coming from other locations, but under the federal rules should be counted here, as military personnel are often counted in other jurisdictions. That's a serious problem, but obviously the greater problem we confront going into this census are immigrants. Our population is estimated very reliably to be at 6.9 million persons, and we want to count each and every one of them. Of the 6.9, 1 million are non-citizens. Some of them are documented, some of them are undocumented. We need these people to be counted to make sure it's accurately representative of our population. And while we all think of it in terms of congressional representation, which is extremely important, and our electoral vote, which is extremely important, it's also important for assistance in a number of areas. Aid to education, for instance. Aid to public transportation, very important. Highways and public transportation. Public health. And it also reflects, since this is the only count we have, the populations of our individual communities. And it's unfortunate that the communities that have the highest numbers of immigrants and the ones that are most at risk for an undercount are the ones that probably need the help the most. But I want to talk also a little bit about the presidential election and presidential primary. Our primary will be on March the 3rd of next year, and March the 3rd is shaping up to be a very busy day. California is going to be on March the 3rd, Texas is on March the 3rd, a number of states are on March the 3rd. Almost a third of the delegates will be selected on March the 3rd. As all of you know, those of you who serve on ward and town committees, you'll also be up for a re-election for your ward and town committee positions on that day as well. We'll be giving you notice, those of you who wish to adjust the size of your committees very soon. If you want to do that, you have to do that by August. And the papers will be available later this year for the March 3rd event. I want to mention, however, that in conjunction with that primary, I have advanced proposals to have 5 days of early voting for the presidential primary. And I think that's very important. That proposal is pending before the legislature right now. I've also had it filed as an amendment to the Senate budget, which will be coming up. I think it's extremely important. I do, however, want to speak about the general election. You know, I think all of us as Democrats are impressed by the size and the depth of our field of candidates for president. And I think all of us are concerned about this election. This is probably the most important election we have had in our country in a very long time. I think all of us have been horrified by what we've seen over the last couple of years. And we could ramp each other up octave by octave in outrage of the things that are going on today, yesterday, next week, but that's not going to solve the problem. We have to win in 2020. We have to win. If there's anything worse than the Trump presidency we now see, it's a second term of the Trump presidency. That's the only thing I could conceive of that could be worse. And what I'm here to say, tell you this morning, remind you this morning, is that this election, the final election, is now less than 18 months from now. That's not a lot of time. And I'm concerned for two reasons. First of all, it's quite obvious that Trump has captured the Republican Party. There is nothing left over there. He owns it. Even here in Massachusetts last week, the Republican State Committee decided that they were going to change the rules for their delegate selection so it's winner take all. They've decided to do that. He owns the Republican Party. They're in lockstep and they're going to be prepared for this battle. We have, as I said, a very impressive field. We have to make sure the process does not overwhelm us. We need to keep focused on the goal of winning in November. That's got to be the focus. We have to. So I'm saying to you, keep in mind that 18 months. It's critically important. You know, we might think we might have the luxury of a long process. We don't. We need to remind everybody, if you really want to win this country back to all the things that we care about and are important to average people, we have to win in November of 2020, and that's a short time from now. So let's keep ourselves focused on that effort. Let's make sure we understand that we're going to get our country back in November of 2020. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Secretary of State. So we're going to hear from our congressman, who happens also to be a candidate for another office, in a minute. But before we do that, just want to acknowledge that we're missing somebody today, Nancy Weinberg, who I think most of you knew quite well from Newburyport. Nancy passed away a couple of months ago, and she was really a driving force of this breakfast. And I'm getting choked up even saying that little bit. Dan Emerson from the the Newbury Town Committee is going to say a few words about Nancy.
Hey everybody. Nancy Weinberg was a staple of this community, and though she's no longer here with us, her presence can be felt. Everybody here has had their path touched by Nancy through her political activism, her work with local nonprofit groups, and all of her efforts to make our community a better place. Nancy has had an impact. And your organizers need to apologize for how crowded the tables are here at the breakfast. It was always Nancy's job to stand up there and give us directions, and then she would always come back after and rearrange everything after we'd all left. Nancy was a longtime active Democrat. For years, she was the chair of the Newbury Democratic Town Committee, one of your hosts today. Her words have been quoted in newspapers such as the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and the New York Post. She passionately supported countless campaigns, including coordinating canvassing for Senator Markey, and most recently, being a regional whip for Bob Massey's gubernatorial primary campaign. Nancy put enormous energy into Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign in 2016 and was proud to be elected as a delegate to the National Convention in Philadelphia. Nancy always fought to support those who shared her vision, and our party is at a loss with her no longer here.
Thank you, Dan. And as Nancy would want, the fight continues. So we are going to hear from our Congressman, Seth Moulton, who is also a candidate for president. Seth? You're the first candidate for president I've ever gotten introduced, so this is pretty cool.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much. Thank you. It is an honor to be here this morning, to be back here. This is a familiar ground for me. And I want to just quickly say a quick word about Nancy myself. She was a figure not just in this room and with all of you, but for all of us who have run for office across the state and come to this corner of Massachusetts to talk about what's important to us and what we hope will be important to all of you. Nancy is someone who was always there to listen, to hear, but also to challenge us, to question us, and really exemplify what a democracy is all about. We shouldn't be trying to make America great again, to go back to some mythical version of a united America that worked for some and not for all. We should be trying to make America better than it's ever been. And you do that, we've always done that, by serving our country. America is a work in progress. When I meet them, they are frustrated with Washington. They feel betrayed by their government. Well, I know that feeling because it reminds me of how many of us felt on the ground in Iraq, when we felt totally left behind by people in Washington who are completely out of touch. So I know that feeling of frustration and betrayal. But in that war, in the worst of circumstances, I saw some of the best America has to offer. And that's the story of our country, of showing our best when it's needed most, of standing up and fighting for what we know is right. Like the millions of American women who have marched for basic respect over the past 2 years, like the teachers who have stood up and protested for basic pay, like the kids, the Parkland kids, who have stood up and spoken out and held their politicians accountable so that they can simply feel safe going to school. That spirit of service is what this country is all about. Because we're a country that hasn't gotten everything right. You know, from the schools that were segregated by race in the 1950s, to the schools that are still segregated by class and race today. We haven't figured out education yet in this country. From the poor and middle class families who couldn't pay for health care in the 1960s, to the poor and middle class families who can't afford health care today. We haven't gotten health care right yet in this country. But at our best, we're a country that doesn't think that we've figured it all out. We're a country that believes that we might. That's why my sister goes to school to teach every single day. She doesn't think that she teaches in a perfect school, and God knows she doesn't think that she teaches perfect kids. I've heard the stories. But she believes she can make them better. And that's why she goes to work. I didn't go back to Iraq 4 times because I thought I was fighting in a perfect war. I just thought I could make it a little bit better by being there on the ground and not having anyone go in my place. And the best people who stand up and run for office, locally on your city council or your school board, across this state or across this nation, we stand up and run to try to make this country a little bit better. That's why I'm in this race. That's why I'm traveling all over this country. Because we have to beat Donald Trump. And I know I can do it. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me here this morning. I would be delighted to take some questions. I know most of us don't get up here and take questions, but it's a proud tradition that I have always followed. And I was here out in Newburyport just last Sunday and had a wonderful turnout at a town hall. We talked about local issues. We talked about the work we're doing for the Merrimack River. Both Lori Trahan and I are teamed up on a pair of bills to address all the concerns literally flowing down the river. And we talked about sorry for the pun, we talked about opioids and how we're trying to address that crisis that is touching just about every American family, no matter where you live. And we talked about national issues as well. So happy to take your questions on the race, on local issues, on whatever you have in mind. Yes, sir.
I know that you recruited a number of people to run for various offices across the country.
Yes.
I'd like to hear more about that, and I think everybody ought to know some of those details.
Don, thank you very much. So my group that I established, Serve America, we set out on a mission in the midterms to help take back the House of Representatives. And at the end of the day, of the 40 seats that Democrats flipped to take back the House, 21 of them, more than half, were endorsed and supported by Serve America, and by many of you here today. Whether you donated to one of those campaigns, whether you got on the phone and made phone calls for Amy McGrath or Mikey Sherrill or Alyssa Slotkin or other amazing American heroes across the country who are running to take back the House, or maybe you just simply kept the home fires burning here at home so that I could go out and do this important work for the party and for the country. Thank you. You should be proud. You know, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives. There are 435 different congressional districts around the country. There is not a single other congressional district in America that had a bigger impact on the midterms than the 6th District of Massachusetts. That's how important this work was. And many of those people who won were veterans. They're people who American voters supported not just because they're Democrats, but because they're leaders. They're leaders that people could trust on both sides of the aisle. We needed to get independent and a lot of Republican votes even for these folks to win in 2018. And that's exactly the model that we've got to think about when we're choosing our nominee for 2020. The Secretary of State said it very well. This is not going to be an easy election to win. But we have a model for that success that's not even 2 years old. It flipped the House, and you were a part of it. So we need to look at that as we look to the future. Thank you. Thanks, John. Oh, am I picking? Okay. Sorry. I thought Ed was picking. My apologies. Yeah, go for it.
I'm a special education teacher here in Massachusetts in Essex. And I actually find education and healthcare near and dear to my heart. There are some people who can see a clear solution to our education funding crisis, which is actually to implement single-payer healthcare, because then our schools, and actually local businesses as well, won't have to provide healthcare to their employees. It will be funded by the state or by the federal government. So I'm actually curious what your plans for education and healthcare funding are, because they are squeezing the middle class.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I actually just signed on to, did everyone hear the question, by the way? Folks in the back? Okay, so this is a local hero, special education teacher in Newburyport, or in Essex. So thank you for your work. You're busy, I'm sure. Very, very busy. And I'm sorry, what's your name? Melissa. So Melissa talked about the connection between education and healthcare. And I convened a group. I brought all the superintendents of schools in for the 6th District about 2 months ago. And this is something that they talked about as well, how a lot of kids are showing up to school without getting adequate health care, They're trying to figure out how the school, what role the school is supposed to play in their lives when it comes to literally just providing health care for these kids and their families. And it highlights the fact that our healthcare system isn't working right now in America because a lot of people are being left out. We are far and away the wealthiest country in the world, and yet our healthcare outcomes are worse than many other countries in the world. I mean, Cuba shouldn't be doing better on some healthcare measures than the United States, nor should Germany and the UK and France and all sorts of other places. We're kind of far down the list in some regards. Now, we do develop some of the best medicines on the planet, and we're driving healthcare innovation for the entire world. But that doesn't mean too much if a lot of our kids can't get basic healthcare. So here's my position on healthcare. Like every other Democrat in this race, I believe that healthcare is a right, and that everybody deserves access to healthcare, period. The Republicans, ever since I came to Washington, voted every single year to take healthcare away. They tried to repeal Obamacare over 65 times. While the Republicans have debated different ways to take healthcare away for folks, Democrats, our party, is debating different ways to make sure everybody has it. And that is a fundamental change that we should all be proud of. Now, a lot of people, a lot of candidates are pushing Medicare for all. I am the only candidate in this race who actually gets single-payer health care because I made a commitment to continue going to the VA even as a member of Congress. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of single-payer health care at the VA. There are some things the VA does really well. For example, the VA negotiates prescription drug prices. Medicare doesn't do that. It means that our prescription drugs are much more affordable than prescriptions through Medicare. That's a good thing. And that's something Medicare should learn. But I've also shown up to VA waiting rooms and seen people waiting for hours just to get seen by a doctor. I was speaking to a VFW in Nevada a couple weekends ago, and all the women there said they cannot get seen for months because the VA doesn't have enough OBGYNs. And we've heard the horror stories of patients literally dying on waiting lists, or even committing suicide in VA waiting rooms because they can't see mental health care professionals. So here's what I think we should do. I believe that we need to make Medicare, or better, a more modern version of Medicare, an option for everybody. But I do not think we should force you off of your private health care plan if you like it. And here's why. Because a system where private health care plans have to compete against a public option, which, by the way, is exactly what President Obama wanted when he proposed Obamacare, that competition is good for the system. It brings down prices, premiums, prescription drug prices, and will improve outcomes for everybody because these different plans will have to compete for your business. And that's a good, healthy thing for the system. The Secretary Galvin mentioned how Medicare is going bankrupt. We've got to fix that problem. And if we force everybody onto Medicare right now, we don't have the funding for it, so it'll break the system. But we do need to make sure that everybody has access to health care. And by the way, if we want to win the general election, we also got to look at how Medicare for all is received across the country, which is not that great. So that's a long answer to your healthcare question, but it's a really important question that a lot of people are asking in this race. And there are a couple other people who have a similar position to mine, but I'm the only one with that experience. So thank you, and thanks for all the work you do for special education. I was just started to say I just signed on to a bill in Washington for full funding for special education. Because back in the 1970s, Congress passed landmark legislation to provide special education in our schools. My uncle Andrew, with Down syndrome, was the first intellectually disabled student to graduate from Longmeadow High School out in Western Massachusetts. My family is so proud of him, and we learned so much from him. He was an amazing part of that community before he died, and that wouldn't have been possible without this legislation. But the problem is, Congress has never funded that mandate. In fact, we provide about 30% of the funding that's required from the federal mandate. And that makes work really hard for people like you. So thank you for all that you do. Yes, sir.
I'm having a hard time wondering why you're running for president. I don't see that anything you just said about health care could have been said by all of the other candidates, it seems to me. What do you think you bring to it with all that would otherwise not be there?
Well, sir, that's a fair question, I guess. I think I just said that. I'm literally the only person in the race who has single-payer health care, and I'm the only person who really has the position that I just articulated. So on health care, I am different than everybody else in this race. I'm also the only person who's actually led troops in combat, who's had the experience of leading Americans in some of the most divisive circumstances imaginable, which I think is important in this race. And one guarantee that I make is if I get elected president, I will be the best president for veterans in American history. Because I know what it's like to go through what these troops do every day, even today, as we speak in the midst of the longest war in American history on the front lines across the globe. And I'm going to talk about why I believe it's time for a generational change in American politics, why I think it's time for the generation that went to Iraq and Afghanistan to step in for the generation that sent us there. Because we have a new set of challenges in America. Folks, the economy is changing faster than it's ever changed before. And a lot of people are being left behind. And you'll hear a lot of candidates in this race talk about how we're going to go back to the old economy, bring back the old jobs, but I hate to tell you, it's not going to happen. We've got to make sure that America is ready for the economy of the future. Half the jobs that will exist in 2040 don't exist today. So even if our education system were perfect right now, we'd have a lot of work to do. So I'm going to talk about how we take this country forward, how we meet the challenges of the future, not the past, how we have a national security. I'm literally the only candidate talking about national security in this entire field. And I'm talking about why we need a new generation of arms, a new generation of arms control, and a new generation of alliances. How we have to cut the big, legacy, old, and expensive weapon systems so that we can invest more at home, and so that we can invest in the challenges of the future. You know, Russia isn't rolling tanks through the Fulda Gap in Eastern Europe, nor do they plan to. But they are attacking us every single day through the internet. China is not just a national security threat, they're an economic threat to us because they steal our ideas and our military secrets every single day through the internet. This is a new generation of challenges. But there is a new generation of leaders stepping up to help us meet those challenges. And that's exactly what I'll do. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. Global warming.
Secretary Pompeo's statement that he's happy that the ice is melting in the North Atlantic. I mean, this is crazy. I'd like to know your views on that.
You know, I usually start the questions on global warming by just reminding people that I'm one of the only members of Congress who actually has a degree in science. And what you're going to see me do in this campaign is what I've already started to do with the Green Jobs Corps, which is talk about what I believe the Green New Deal should be all about. I was one of the first people in Washington to sign on to the new Green Deal when it was, the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal, when it was a framework, an idea, a statement, a stake in the ground that climate change is an existential issue that we must address. But I don't think that the components of the Green New Deal should be just the way they are right now. So I'm talking about what I believe should make up the Green New Deal as we go forward. So thank you very much, sir, for asking that question this evening. I'll end by just saying another word of thanks. The work that all of you do every single day, and that most of you have been doing for longer than me, because I'm not too long for this job in politics, is exactly the kind of work that we need to strengthen our democracy across this country. So I don't want you to lose perspective about how important your work is. You know, whether you were actively involved in the Serve America effort that I organized to help take back the House, whether you run in local elections, whether you volunteer for the committee, help set up this breakfast, just encourage other people to come out and vote. That's how we're going to fix this country. That's how we're going to win and defeat Donald Trump. That's how we're going to set an example for the rest of the world about what America is truly all about. So I'm inspired to come to a full room like this because I know this is democracy in action. And this message, this spirit, is exactly what we need across this country. So thank you for all that you do every day, every year. Thank you for being great Americans.
So now we're going to hear from another statewide elected official who has been here, I think, pretty much every time since she first ran for state auditor several terms ago. And please give a warm welcome to our state auditor, Suzanne Bump.
Thank you. I really am delighted to be here, and I appreciate the fact that Congressman Moulton was here. He is a man who truly does have the courage of his convictions and is willing to put himself out in service. I thought it was particularly poignant that he pointed out that the 4 tours of duty that he did was in support of a war that he did not support. But he did it for our benefit because it was an obligation that he saw that he had as a citizen of the United States. So I want to thank you for the support that you showed to me in November. I was delighted to be reelected to a 3rd term as your state auditor. I'm very proud of the work that we are doing in the auditor's office to improve government accountability and transparency, trying to help make government more effective and more efficient, better serve you, better use your dollars. And those are the things really that the office is known for. But there's another side to the work that we do there that I just want to mention briefly, because it isn't just about seeing how efficiently we are doing the things that we are doing. It's also about identifying unmet needs in our society and in our governmental programs. And in that vein, just a couple of weeks ago, my Division of Local Mandates picked up on 2 different things that we have kind of been recurring themes in the work of the office over the past 8 years. One is looking at issues of child welfare, particularly as expressed in the work of the Department of Children and Families. And the other is looking at the issue of local mandates and the fact that, in fact, state government does not provide all of the support to local governments for the programs that they ask them to undertake. And those two thrusts of the work of the office came together recently in a report that we did that took a look at how well we're serving the educational needs of our children in foster care. But I have a little friend, he is now 10 years old, and his mother was telling me that he was so excited in August to be returning to school in September. He wasn't missing his friends in particular. He wasn't missing his teachers or his bus drivers. He was excited to be going into his 4th grade because it was going to be the first time in his young educational career that he was going back to the same school that he was in June. This is a young boy who had been removed from his parents' home several years ago. He missed more days than he attended of both kindergarten and first grade. In second grade, he was in a different school with a different family. In third grade, he finally found stability in the home of a friend of mine who took him in along with his two siblings and ultimately adopted these 3 children. Now in the 4th grade, he is still struggling. And he is, I wouldn't say resentful, that goes a little bit too far, but he's jealous of his little sister in pre-K who's learning how to read because he never had that opportunity. And he, unfortunately, is typical of the 6,800 children that we have in this Commonwealth in foster care and in state care. They're lacking family stability, they're lacking educational continuity. It means that they drop out more frequently, they're truant more frequently, they end up in bad jobs, they don't go on to college, many of them end up in incarceration. We have an obligation to help these children in all of the ways that we can, particularly by supporting closer collaboration between DCF and our school systems. We need, as a Commonwealth, to address this important issue. The numbers are only growing with the problems in our society, the lack of family stability, the opioid crisis. We need to help, the state needs to help as well our school districts cope with the costs of providing the programming for these children, or sometimes the transportation for these children who may be trying to maintain educational continuity by staying in their original school, but may be placed with a foster family miles and miles away. So I hope that if these are matters that are of interest to you, you might take a look at the website, my website, and the report. So mass.gov/auditor. Look at that report. If you're on a school committee, I was very pleased to work with the Association of School Committees and School Superintendents on this. I spoke recently at a conference. They are united behind this effort to improve educational outcomes for these really vulnerable and deserving kids in our society. I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to provide this kind of service to the Commonwealth, and I want to thank you for all that you do day in and day out to sustain our democracy. Thank you.
And now I would like to turn it over to Pat Skibby.
Thank you, Ed. So I have a story of wonderful success in education. This is the 2nd annual presentation of the Kathy Pasquina Civic Engagement Scholarship Award by the West Newbury Democratic Town Committee. Kathy unfortunately can't be with us today, but a few words about her. She founded the West Newbury Democratic Town Committee 34 years ago and was chair until she left our town about a year and a half ago. Kathy has been an inspiration to all of us, all regional Democrats way beyond the boundaries of West Newbury. You know the saying, let George do it. The idea that I'm not doing whatever it is, I'm going to sit back and hope someone else, George, does it. That is the opposite of Kathy Pasquina's MO. She led by example. She's been an icon of civic engagement, and we're proud to be awarding the scholarship in her honor. This year, we had 4 extraordinarily qualified applicants. Our scholarship winner is Pentucket's senior Emily Riley. You can come up if you want to. Reviewing her transcript, I see that she has very, very close to all A's and A pluses throughout her high school career, and that she challenged herself by taking a number of advanced placement courses. She's a student athlete competing in cross country and basketball. She's been inducted into the National Honor Society and also into the Foreign Language National Honor Society in Spanish. According to her teacher recommendations, she takes a leadership role in a variety of academic situations. Her work ethic and profound determination to succeed are stressed. Her civic engagement actions include being student council representative all 4 years and being co-president in this her senior year. She participated in the Model United Nations for 3 years, the duties of which included becoming adept at public speaking. In that role, she was a delegate to the Refugee Committee, focusing on finding solutions to the Syrian refugee situation. Further, she volunteers at the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. Congratulations.
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to call up John Husianitis from the Salisbury Town Committee.
Good morning, fellow Democrats. The Salisbury Democratic Town Leadership Scholarship for 2019, our 10th such award, is awarded to a Salisbury resident attending Triton Regional High School who was one of 11 outstanding applicants. Miss Grace Poster. Grace is the daughter of Robin and Neil Poster, will be attending Hofstra University on Long Island in New York in the fall, where she plans to study international business. Grace has been president of Triton's Decker chapter, class officer for Triton's class of 2019, senior officer of Triton's Community Service Club, and this year was the inspiration behind Triton High School's Viking Day of Giving, where students, teachers, and staff gathered over 2 weekend days to clean, paint, and show their Viking pride in their high school. Choosing immigration as a topic she would like to address, Grace said, quote, "Leadership skills I have developed will provide me with the qualities necessary to resolve this issue because I utilize international collaboration to resolve traumatic occurrences that provide refugees and asylum seekers while helping Americans understand the importance of immigrants who, along with Native Americans, are the backbone of this country," unquote. Please join me in congratulating our 2019 Salisbury Democratic Town Leadership Scholarship recipient, Miss Grace Poster.
Congratulations. Can I say thank you?
I'd just like to say thank you for everyone here today and for the Salisbury Democratic Committee. It's a great honor and it will really help me in my future career. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, John. So congratulations, Grace and Emily. It's great to see the things that you've done in high school, and we know you'll do great things in the future. So thank you for keeping us all moving as a society. So next we are going to hear from our sheriff. The law is in the house, so our sheriff, Kevin Coppinger. Thanks for your patience.
Well, good morning, everyone. Ed just joked the law is in the house. I got to tell you, I've been in corrections now coming up on about 2.5 years, and it is a time of major change within the correctional field. A lot of you may have followed this over the last year or so with criminal justice reform. Our elected officials, including Senator Zoglio over here and your other state and elected officials from your area up here, worked very hard with us in the Sheriff's Department to craft some really good changes that I think we all need to address a lot of the issues, including the opioid issue that was discussed when Congressman Moulton was speaking. So I'd just like to touch on a couple of those things, starting with the issue of mental health. Essex County, believe it or not, has the #1 population now of inmates amongst all 14 counties in Massachusetts. About 50% of our inmates suffer from mental illness. And that's very difficult to deal with. And I got to be honest with you, with that number of inmates, I always say this up front, we have a lot of people that are in our jails and our prisons at the state level who belong there. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's not sugarcoat this. There are people in jails and prisons who should never see the light of day. It is just a fact. But on the flip side of that, there are a lot of people that are in our jails, and I can speak for Middleton, who don't belong there. And a lot of these folks are victims of mental illness. And we can talk a lot about prevention mechanisms and everything else, but I'm at the end of the food chain here in the criminal justice system, so I'm going to focus on corrections and what we do now. But part of the criminal justice bill gave us a lot of alternatives now and some new initiatives to address the mental illness within our facilities. So by training them in mental health first aid, that's a big one. Second big one that we've done, and I'm proud to say last month we graduated our first class of about 8 officers. We have another group going in June to a second class, but crisis intervention teams, better known as CIT. We train our officers to obviously tactical, go in there and control the situations. Our traditional role is care, custody, and control. But I like to tell our officers, we pay you not to fight, but to control. And one of the new things that we did with the CIT, this crisis intervention teams, is to teach our officers how to go in there when we have somebody in crisis, how to use what, in my opinion, is their best weapon, and that is their mouth. So one of the things we've had in Middleton Jail for several years is a detox unit. We have 2 units in there, one for the men and one for the women. 42 beds in each one in a 28-day program. We work very closely with the drug courts in Lynn, Lawrence, and now in Haverhill, which has just opened up since they opened up the rehabbed court a few weeks ago. What happens really is, this is a voluntary thing. They're working with the courts, the defense attorneys, the DA's office, local police, and probation. Individuals will come into the detox, and they go through the 28-day program. They successfully complete it. They go back in front of the judge. Hopefully the judge will let them get back out into the community. Part of the criminal justice bill, they allowed us to put 7 pilot programs together within the Commonwealth, and I'm proud to say Essex is one of them. So we're going to bring in 2 other forms of overdose, overdose prevention, but substance abuse treatment, which is buprenorphine, which is better known as Suboxone, and methadone. These are major, major changes coming into a correctional institution. And very quickly, what will happen is when somebody comes into the booking, to the intake, when they first arrive at the jail, if they're on a confirmed prescription, we will maintain that prescription for them while they're inside. And as they get towards the end of their sentence, 30 days before they're going to be released, we will then induce them on one of these medications if they want to, if the doctor prescribes it, so when they leave us and they go back to the community, they won't overdose. Now, you may have heard this statistic before, but people leaving the jail are at 120 times more apt to overdose than John Q. Public, who someone's not incarcerated. And that's why we're going to do these, bring these new medications in. And one of the other things that I really want to mention before I finish up here is our reentry program, especially up in this area of the county, the northern portion of Essex. Where we have partnered up with Essex County, a group of Essex County police chiefs, started right here in Newburyport from Marshal Mark Murray. It's just a consortium of we're working together, sharing of information together on folks who have overdose problems. We'll give them the data when they're leaving the jail. We give them here. They're partnering, I believe, with local health care and local social service agencies in the area. So, when we do the handoff, when somebody's coming back to their city and town, the local police department know it, the local health care workers know it, so these folks will have services available to them. I am very proud to say that we have produced our very first annual report for the Essex County Sheriff's Department. It is online. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It is online. You probably never remembered, but www.essexsheriffma.org. So thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Jeremy Camo, who is the training director or training manager for Mass Dems. So we've heard a lot about fantastic issues, and we also need to remember we got to win elections. So Jeremy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. So on behalf of Mass Dems, thank you for having me here today. This is a great group of activists. I've heard a lot about you, and so I know that you work really, really hard. Thank you for all the work that you've done in previous elections, especially 2018, but also thank you for all the work that you're going to be doing for us in the 2020 elections. So one of my roles as the at Mass Dems is to provide training. So Vote Builder, who's ever heard of Vote Builder, or Van, or Minivan, if you've ever gone canvassing. Those are the tools that I train Democrats to help get Democrats elected, like the Democrats that we've heard from today. So I think it's really important. So if you're actually looking for trainings, please feel free to email me at jeremy@massdems.org. My email address is on the website, so feel free to call me or email me. I'd love to come to any of these town committees or any of the other town committees that are represented here today and train your activists to be better Democrats and get out there and work for our elected officials who are in office or candidates that we're trying to flip seats from Republican to Democrat. So I think it's really important to note some of the other things that we're doing and some of the other hats that I wear. I'm actually co-chair of the Bay State Stonewall Democrats. Bay State Stonewall Democrats are the state's LGBTQ Democrats. I'm really proud of the fight that we're taking to the Mass GOP right now and Jim Lyons. We all know who Jim Lyons is. We all know how horrible he has been. Thank you. Thank you. The problem is, though, Charlie Baker and Karen Polito, our governor and our lieutenant governor, they're silent right now on that. They haven't said a word. For 2 days, they have been silent on the anti-transgender, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric coming out of the Republican Party. As Democrats, we have a different story. We're doing something different. We're fighting for the LGBTQ community. You know, it's really important to, so my other job, I'm the millennial organizer for Mass Dems, and it's really important to cultivate our bench, to cultivate those who are going to follow our leaders in elected office. So hopefully one day the 2 scholarships winners will be elected officials and fight for the rights that they believe in and fight for all of us. So thank you so much for having me here today, and let's go fight and win.
Our final speaker, and thank you so much for your patience. So thank you for being here and welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ed. Good morning, Democrats. All right, good. You're still with me. You're still with me. The state budget that we are working on currently. The House just voted on their version of the budget for the entire state. The governor had put out his proposal. The House of Representatives just voted on their proposal. And now we in the state Senate are going to be taking up our budget in a little over a week. But we did just have our budget released, and it is a bold, very progressive budget, and I am really excited about that. That's before all of the amendments. So Senate President Spilka, Chair Mike Rodrigues did a tremendous job at identifying the needs and priorities that are our shared needs and priorities statewide, and really taking the time to listen to all of us who have unique priorities and challenges in our communities. And I'm proud to say that in this upcoming budget, I've been working with the Chair of Ways and Means for a new line item that was included in the rollout of the budget, so we didn't have to fight for an amendment, to create a pilot program that was started through working with United Teen Equality Center. It's going to start in Essex County, but the sheriffs endorse this. That will be a pilot program to implement mental health services, allow social workers, allow people who can guide with career opportunities and all sorts of those things, for those people to come into the prison before the inmates are released and start working with them during their time there and get them set up so that when they leave, they have an opportunity as they're walking out the door. So we're allocating $4 million towards that pilot program for this upcoming year, and I'm really excited about that. We couldn't do it without the partnership with the sheriffs and others, so thank you for working with us on that. Thank you. Other things that I know are of tremendous importance to this region in particular, where we have the regional school districts, more rural communities, is the issue of education. And I know that I've spoken with you again many times about this, and those of you who read the paper have heard about what's going on with this. But right now, we are fighting hard in the Senate to make sure that we are adequately funding education. And the governor came in with numbers that were just not adequate. The House also came in. They did a little bit better, but still with numbers that just weren't adequate. So the Senate bumped up the numbers for public education across the board for the state by $50 million more. But then we talk about all this funding, right, that we need. Where are we getting the revenue from? Because we know we're spending what's coming in right now. And we happen to be running at a surplus right now, and that's great. Revenues were really up during the month of April, so we're excited about that, but that's not consistent for anybody who's been paying attention. We don't have the consistent revenue stream that we need coming in. So in our Senate budget proposal, we propose a 15% tax on opioid manufacturers. And we also propose a 75% tax on the wholesale value of our vaping and e-cigarette projects. So we talk about the need for revenue for education. I mean, this is something that will greatly benefit not only our need for revenue to give back to public education, but that's going to help to prevent the purchase of these products by our young people. So we are working on that. Amongst other things, and I'm going to start to wrap it up because I know it's been a really long morning, but I do just want to briefly just mention the fact that we are also working on a lot of your environmental concerns in this upcoming budget. I have proposed a significant amount of funding go towards the Merrimack River District Commission, which I'm sure I know I see a couple of people back there. Merrimack River Watershed Council, thank you for all your work, and other groups that have been working on this with me. I filed legislation to create the commission for the river, and I'm trying to get that passed in the budget so we can get started with this. It's already had a public hearing. It has support from the chair of the Environmental Committee. I'm excited about that, so we're going to try to get this through the budget. I also am proposing an amendment to do a pilot program in the city of Newburyport, and that would be a pilot project that looks at the issue of pre-notification for this combined sewer overflow issue that we're having. And then just one recent success that I'm really happy about, we did secure, Senator Ives previously had filed in a bond bill $2 million to go back when we originally started hearing about the CSO issue. It was because of an outage, a power outage at the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. And that was where all of this started, where everyone started paying attention to this. Senator Ives filed some money for that in the bond bill to get them a generator so that the next time the power goes out, we don't see millions of gallons of sewage pouring into the river. And that was being held up by the administration. I met with DEP, I met with DCR. We had a very productive discussion and conversation about the need for that generator, and I'm very happy that they have agreed to release that funding. So we're getting the generator. So I have a lot more to say, but I know that you have all been very patient with all of us as your guest speakers this morning, and that you probably want to go out and enjoy the beautiful sunshine. But I'll end with just saying, thanks so much for your advocacy. Thanks so much for your support. None of us can do anything that we do without your support, without you keeping us informed of what it is that's important to you. So keep being the strong, amazing advocates you are, and I believe that together we can continue to make a difference. Have a great morning.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. In closing, I just want to, I think I neglected a little bit Kathy Pasquina, who is not able to be here today because of a personal conflict. Just want to thank Kathy for all that she's done to make this an amazing event. She did organize the speakers, as she does every year. So, and thank you so much to the speakers. I think we really learned a lot, one about our values as Democrats, but just so much about the important issues and the great work that's being done, either down in DC, despite what's going on down there in general, and at the State House and locally as well, what you're all doing in your respective committees. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you and have a great day.